a minute. Anybody feeling like they'd have to? It worked when we tried it, didn't it, Tim?
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Oh, is it just that one now?
Is there a stop? What does that say? I can't see.
On and off. Oh, that's night shot plus though, isn't it?
Yeah, put it back because we didn't touch that. Has it come through yet? Sorry about this, Josh.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Should this be on or?
Do you want to talk through it? Just
Yeah.
You can't hear it.
What does that say?
Do I need it for the, I can just, you can hear me, can't you?
If he happens to switch on.
Yeah, put it back because we didn't touch that. Has it come through yet? Sorry about this, Josh.
Are we there?
Your microphone's on.
Is it on now?
It's a few seconds delay.
Sounds like it is now.
Try your microphone now, Josh.
Hello, speaking. Hello. Hello, this one. Or this one.
Is that any better phone?
There's 10-second delay or something. I don't know really.
I'm going to have to run with that. It's all switched on, so.
Yeah. Okay.
What else to do? It's all turned on, so. Any thoughts, anybody?
Well, are you turning that off?
Yeah.
Is your volume up on that?
Yeah. I don't know.
Okay, well, let's just sit then.
Okay. This darling. Right. So. So we're going to be spending these 2 days looking at the subject of the mind. Basically, it's a bit of a cheat really, because when you say the subject of the mind, and you're teaching Buddhist things from the point of view of the mind, you're actually just teaching Buddhism, because Buddhism is that's what it's all about. To say you're teaching about the mind or teaching about Buddhism is almost the same thing. So it's really a very wide-ranging subject to talk about the mind. But we're going to do it from the partly from the academic or the understanding how we conceive and how we present the model of the mind from a Buddhist point of view. But we're also going to do it experientially as much as possible, because obviously the really meditation itself, all meditation is really a concern with the mind. You're always meditating with the mind. In fact, meditation, not only is meditation done with the mind, meditation is done with the mental, what we call the mental consciousness. when you talk about it, it's a very important thing to understand actually, that when you're meditating, we have in Buddhism we talk about 6 senses, not 5. Generally we talk about 5 senses. We talk about in Western terms, or in Western scientific or psychological terms, you talk about 5 senses, don't you? You see, you hear, you touch, you taste, you smell. Is that all 5? Have I done 5? You have your 5 senses, yes. But and this is a Buddhist way of presenting it, but of course it's not really just Buddhist, it's how it is. In fact, we have 6 senses, don't we? Because we do all those things. We see and we hear and we touch and we taste and we smell and we do all that. But we also think, right? We think and we dream and we have emotions and we have feelings, and that doesn't go on in your senses, does it? You don't think with your eyesight. You don't dream or have memories or plans with your eyesight. You do it with your what we call the mental consciousness. So there is a 6th sense, which is obviously there. It just, for some reason, Western science doesn't talk about it. I don't know why. But you obviously have a 6th sense. You have a place where the thoughts are going on. When you're dreaming, for example, your senses are gone, aren't they? The senses, it said that your senses completely dissolve actually when you're sleeping, and you can feel this when you go to sleep actually sometimes. Same thing happens as when you die apparently, that your senses dissolve in. You know when you're about to go to sleep and your body feels really heavy, the limbs stop working. You'll experience that. When you're just about to drop off, and it's like your limbs don't work anymore. If you tried to move your leg, you wouldn't be able to anymore. If you think about it, it can be quite frightening actually. Sometimes it can be frightening, can't it? That's what happens when you die as well. It's the first thing that happens when you die, is that the consciousness comes in and it leaves the senses. And it also happens when you sleep. But obviously your consciousness doesn't stop when you go to sleep. It doesn't work from the point of view of the senses anymore, but it's still there. And where is it? It's in what we call the mental consciousness. Now, the mental consciousness is, and this is what's important here, is where you meditate. Because it isn't the sense consciousnesses that cause problems. We don't suffer because of our sense consciousness. All our sense consciousnesses do is see things, or hear things, or taste things, or touch things. That's all they do. They don't look at something, see it, and then judge it as good or bad, or like or don't like, or you don't get stressed out or unhappy or anxious about something from your eyesight. You get upset or you get problems and you get delusional, what we call delusions and all the rest of it in your mental consciousness, don't you? Not your sense consciousness. So the first really important thing, and before we can do some meditation now, but the first really important thing in terms of meditation, Buddhist meditation, proper meditation, is that you're meditating with your mental consciousness, not with your eyes. So if you ever come across systems, and they do exist, don't they, where you're looking at a crystal ball, or you're listening to meditation music, or this sort of, nonsense, when you're listening to meditation music, or you're, whatever, that's not meditating. It might be very lovely and make you feel good for half an hour and relieve your stress, and it might be all wonderful, but it's not meditating. It's not meditating because what meditating is, and the word in Tibetan and Sanskrit is very much conveys this. It doesn't necessarily in English yet. The word for meditation means to transform your mind. It doesn't mean to just space out. It doesn't mean to sit and relieve your stress. It doesn't even mean just to be mindful. It's much, much more than that. It's transforming your mind. So you don't transform your mind from your eyesight. What would be the point? Oh yeah, now I see things. I'm going to transform my eyesight. I look at things now and they're all red colour, and I'll transform my eyesight to see them as yellow. It doesn't help you at all. It doesn't make the slightest bit of difference. Your mind transformation takes place in your mental consciousness. That's where you feel stress. That's where you get anxious. That's where you have anger and jealousy and pride and positive emotions. That's where love happens, and compassion and wisdom. All those things happen in the mental consciousness. So there's no point in trying to transform any other consciousness other than your mental consciousness. So if you're ever doing meditation on any other object which is involved with your senses, it's wrong. It might not be useless. As I say, it might help you feel better. It might relieve your stress, and you might better feel nice for a half an hour. But it's not meditation, because it's not transforming where you want to be transforming. So we're going to look at the Buddhist presentation of the mind from the point of view of how the traditional Buddhist texts give it, but also from the experiential point of view in meditating on the mind. The most profound meditation you can do in all Tibetan Buddhist, all Buddhist systems, is on the mind. So and there's various ways that you can do that, various ways of looking at the mind and meditating on the mind, and we'll try and go through those and practice those. But let's start off, because all meditation practice, whether it's simple mindfulness of breathing, or whether it's more complicated analytical meditation, or whether it's tantric meditation, or the sort of higher systems of Dzogchen and Mahamudra and those sorts of meditation, all meditation begins with mindfulness of breathing. It was the thing that the Buddha taught most. It was the thing he gave as the most important object to start with. So mindfulness of breathing, just breathe watching your breath, is the basis of all meditation, including meditation on the mind. So we're going to go through all these different types of meditation, but let's start now in the morning here with just 10-15 minutes of mindfulness of breathing, and then also motivation as well for what we're going to do for the next couple of days. Everybody's familiar with, you all know how to do mindfulness of breathing, right?
Are you okay with that part, mindfulness of breathing? I was trying to get that split.
No, I'm good.
You're fine? In our mindfulness of breathing meditation, we're just watching the breath going in, going out. You can use counting if you want or not, it's up to you, but it's just whatever you find is easiest, using the breath all the way in and all the way out, or just the tip of the nostrils, and counting in various ways, whatever it works for you. Again, as I've just been saying there, even when you're doing mindful breathing, you're watching the breath. It's the mind that's watching the breath that you're focusing on. As you watch the breath going in and the breath going out, there's an image of the breath which you're getting, and that's what you're focusing on. So let's do that 15 minutes, and we'll do a bit of motivation as well. So it's always good to take a few deeper breaths before you start to meditate, just 1 or 2 deeper breaths. And especially on the out breath, and just release into the meditation. Let everything else go. You don't need to be anywhere else, thinking anything anywhere else. Just bring your mind to the here and now. And the movement of the breath going in, and the movement of the breath going out. And as you focus gently but firmly on the breath, make a conscious decision or effort to actually relax into your meditation. It's very important to let go into meditation, not to push yourself into meditation. Just relax with your attention gently but firmly on the breath going in and the breath going out. just spent the last few minutes motivating, setting our intention in the right direction, why we're doing what we're doing, our study, our practice, understanding that suffering we experience, difficulties we experience now, in the past and in the future. The root of all that lies in self-cherishing, lies in putting ourselves before others, putting ourselves as most important. The root of all our suffering lies in that. And conversely, the root of all happiness comes from cherishing others, comes from putting others before oneself. So that mind cherishing other living beings is a mind to always be adopted, to be developed. And those other living beings that we should cherish are going through enormous amounts of suffering. Physical sufferings and mental sufferings. So much suffering in the human realm, in the animal realm, in other realms of existence. The living beings, although they want to be happy, that's what all they want is to be happy. They do things which push happiness away from them. And although they don't want to suffer, although they don't want problems and difficulties, they continually create causes for more and more suffering and more problems. So since we are slightly better off in that we've found something that leads to real happiness, we've met authentic, real teachings, and since we're related to all these other beings, since our happiness depends upon them, then it's our responsibility to do what we can to be able to relieve the suffering of others and to give them the happiness they wish for. And to do that, we need to develop wisdom, compassion, understanding in our own minds. And so with that intention, to develop our minds for the benefit of others, is why we'll do our practice and study. Only for the benefit of others.
Please keep watching me on the laptop so I can.
Let's just do the Heart Sutra together this morning at least, which is on page 8. The Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on Masvalta's mountain in Rajgir, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked at the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form also is not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no eye element and so forth until and including no mind element and no mental conscious element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and power. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly completely awakened to the unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, in the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared Tada Om Gati Gati, Paragati, Prasangati, Buddhist Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that one should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in the entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras and gandharvas, are overjoyed and highly praise what has been spoken by the Black Man. Just on the next page, the verses to dispel hindrances. I prostrate to the gathering of the Dakinis in the three chakras, who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magic emanation, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Akasama Akasama. Akasama Tayada Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasam Gati Bodhisattva. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed. May they be dispelled, may they be pacified, may they be completely pacified. May all negative forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of the 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions of Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma, and may be the auspiciousness and perfect happiness here right now.
That's fine.
Right, so if you look at what I've put there, the basis of what we're going to talk about this weekend is going to be on this quote, which comes from the literature which is the Prajnaparamita literature, which you all know by heart, don't you? Know very well. Yes. The Prajnaparamita sutras are known as the wisdom sutras that the Buddha gave. There are many. There are I can't remember. There's 20 or so different types of Prajnaparamita sutra of varying lengths. The longest one being 100,000 verses, and then there's a 20,000 verse one. There's an 8,000 verse one. There's the Heart Sutra, which we just did, which is a small one, and the very smallest Prajnaparamita Sutra is one syllable. So there are various types of Prajnaparamita Sutra, but out of those, the quote we're looking at here comes from the 8,000 verse Prajnaparamita Sutra, and the quote which I think I mentioned in the advertising for this, that it's a quote which the Dalai Lama often uses, which very succinctly but very beautifully explains the path from all its different aspects, the whole of the path to Buddhahood. And the quote, as it says here, is, "The mind is devoid of mind, for the nature of mind is clear light." That's all the quote is, very short, but within that is all the teachings that lead up to Buddhahood. Basically, there are three parts to that quote. The first part is the mind. That's the first two words, the mind. The second part is that the mind is devoid of mind. So the second part is the fact that the mind is devoid of mind. And the third part is that for the nature of mind is clear light. Now, those three parts to that quote, and we'll look at them individually, are explaining really the three levels of Buddhist practice. The first one is the mind. The first one, the mind. And when we're saying, when we start off with the initial level of the mind, then we're looking at the mind on a conventional, normal level. Looking at what is the mind? What does it consist of? What happens to the mind? What processes go on in the mind? What controls the mind? What are the different parts of the mind? How does the mind work on a normal, conventional, everyday level? So that's the first part. And that obviously, from a Buddhist point of view, or from a spiritual point of view, is enormously important. Because as we all know, the working with the mind is what Dharma practice is about. That is what Dharma practice is, working with the mind. In when we talk about in Tibetan, what is a Buddhist and what is a non-Buddhist, in Tibetan they use the word insider and outsider for Buddhist and non-Buddhist. And it, what's that?
Nangba.
That's right, Nangba and Shiropa. So an insider, it gives, when you first hear that, you think, well, hang on, insider, that's not very nice. We're all inside and they're all outside and different, and we shouldn't. But it's not meaning that. It's meaning, when it says that we're in, to be a Buddhist one's an insider. The more you have, very, very basic, fundamental Buddhist understanding. Happiness doesn't lie in external things. It doesn't come from external things. It doesn't come from how much you possess, or how many material things you have, or how rich you are, or how principle. But happiness comes from within ourselves. In other words, another way of putting it is that, which I like, the way of putting this is that our happiness, the more we try to take from the world to be happy, the more we try to take externally from the world into ourselves to be happy, which is the way most people feel happiness is accomplished, the more I can get, the more money I can get, the more friends I have, the more, even within Dharma practice, when you become a Buddhist, the more of a knowledge I can get. You can do it just as much from a Buddhist point of view as any other point of view. The more I understand about Buddhism, the happier I'll be. In other words, what you're taking from external to yourself into yourself. If you believe that to be the source of happiness, you're an outsider. You're someone who takes things outside. And of course the reality is that that isn't the way happiness comes about. The more you take into yourself, the more you bring into yourself, the more you not just important in the beginning of our understanding of our practice of Buddhism, but it's always important. It's always important, and no matter how many years you've been practicing Buddhism, or how long you've studied or whatever, it's really important to always come back to that, because you forget it all the time. You forget, and you become involved in external things, and you think those are important. You don't start true practice until you give up on those things and you let go of those things and you work inside yourself. So the mind, this first part of this quote, the mind, is looking at the thing which is the source of our happiness and our suffering. Nothing else. It's looking at the basis of our happiness and suffering. So the mind, and we're going to look at the different presentations of the mind and what we really mean very clearly by the mind from a Buddhist point of view. Because for two reasons. One is because if we agree, and hopefully we do, if we agree that that's where happiness is coming from, if we agree that the source of our joy in life, experience, our happiness comes from inside ourselves, not from outside ourselves, then of course the first thing you have to do is understand clearly what is that thing that you're working on. If the mind is where you're working, what is the mind? What is this place where I'm working? What is this place? Whether it's meditation, or whether it's chanting, or whether it's practice, or whether it's study, or whatever else, what is the mind that I'm working on? The mind is empty of mind. Yeah. Yes. The fundamental, normal way we see the mind. If you don't understand that level, you can't understand the emptiness of the mind. You can't understand that there is no mind, that this thing which you think is mind is empty. When we talk about emptiness or non-true existence, we're not talking about an abstract phenomena or an abstract concept that things are, there is a phenomena called emptiness and we've just got to find it. Different to other spiritual traditions as well. In other spiritual traditions they talk about reaching the transcendental or touching the God, what's the word they use, God principle or God. In some Hindu traditions they talk about that, don't they? I can't remember the word they use, but we're not looking in Buddhism to reach some sort of transcendental state, or we're not looking to become spaced out or otherworldly or anything about the whole Buddhist teachings. Is that we're not trying to go anywhere with Buddhist teachings. We're not trying to change ourselves in Buddhist teachings. We're not trying to change the world around us. We're not doing any of those things. We're seeing things as they are. It comes up all the time within things that the Buddha said, and within things which the commentators on the Buddha's teaching said. All the time comes up. Waking up. You've all heard that, haven't you? The Buddha woke up. The Buddha became awake. The Buddha saw things as they are. The Buddha saw the nature of things the way they are. So what does that mean? It means that the Buddha looked at something, and in this example here, what we're looking at, the mind. He looked at something, a phenomena, and he understood the nature of it. Or he looked at himself as a person, and we look at ourselves as a person, we understand what we are, what the nature of ourselves is. We look at a table, or a phone, or a microphone, or whatever it may be, and we look at that thing, and we understand the nature of that thing. And that's what brings freedom. That's what brings you awake. That's what brings Buddhahood. It's nothing more complicated than that. It's very simple in a way. All we are doing is looking at phenomena, looking at things and seeing them for what they are, rather than, and this is where it's important, rather than the way we project them to be. And this is the problem, is that we project. With our minds, we project onto reality some sort of existence which it doesn't have. Now what we do with the mind as we're talking about here, we've got the mind, what the mind as it is. We're going to talk about what it is and what makes up the mind. We have the mind, and we don't just see it as it is, but we see it as being a mind, my thoughts, my emotions, my personality, me, in fact. Because when you talk about understanding the emptiness of self, you've all heard that concept, yes? The emptiness of self. Really, when you look into the non-true existence of self, that I don't truly exist, you're not really talking about the body. It's fairly easy to understand the body's not you, isn't it? It's pretty obvious, especially as you sort of start to get old, like I am, and the body starts to collapse, and you go grey and all the rest of it. It's pretty easy to understand that, hang on, this thing which is starting to fall apart, and all the rest of it, it's not me. If it was me, then how come before I was fit and well and healthy and didn't have any problems, and now I've got all these aches and pains? You can quite clearly see it's not me. The body changes all the time. You can see the body changes all the time. You can have limbs removed from the body, and it doesn't stop you being you, does it? You can have facelifts if you want, and it doesn't stop you being you. You cut your hair can be one style, and then you can choose a new style. Again, it doesn't change you, does it? It changes the way you look, but it doesn't change you, what you believe to be yourself. So, although we do, to some extent, in the sort of heightened stages of our stupidity, if you like, when we're being really completely ignorant, we do associate ourselves with our bodies. We do think that I am my body. Really, any slight analysis or slight sort of investigation into whether you exist or not truly will very easily see that you're not your body. It's not your body that you really think is you. Any slight investigation will reveal that. So when you come down to what really is me, what is this person here? It's really the mind that you come into. It's really that I'm this sort of person. I'm English, or I'm a male, or I'm a female, or I'm a kind person, or I'm an unkind person, or I'm an angry person, or I'm an educated person, or an uneducated person. It's the mind which we associate as ourselves, isn't it? It's that which we hang on to as being me, because that from our viewpoint is always with us. The sense of me, the sense of I, was there when we were small kids, and as you grew up, and we'll look into this more when we get to this probably tomorrow. But as you grow up and you go through your life, the body's always changing. You go from being a small child and you go through your teenage years and your 20s and 30s and so on. The body's always changing. There's always a sort of change in all that. But all through that change, there appears to be something which is you, doesn't it? You say, I went on holiday last year. You don't say, that person who used to be me went on holiday last year, do you? Or you say, I went to, you might be in your 50s or 60s, but you still say, I went to such and such school. Or I grew up in such and such a town. You don't say, that person who was me 30 or 40 years ago grew up in such. You say, I went to, don't you? Now, obviously, when you're thinking that, you're not thinking the body. You're not thinking that my body that I had when I was 3 years old is the same body. You know that's not you. You know the body's changed. It's obvious. But you're thinking there's something in there which hasn't changed. There's something which you when you were 3 years old and is still you now. There's something which through all the changes in your life and all the changes in your body and all the changes in your circumstances is pervading through all of that. Something persists. Me, I, that persists. And the object or the basis upon which you do that is the mind, isn't it? There's something in here which is with me. It was always there. It's always there. That's why when you insulted me 5 years ago, and you're still angry about it now, because that was me you insulted. It wasn't someone else you insulted 5 years ago. It was me. And now, today, you meet this person, you haven't met, someone insulted you 5 years ago, and then you meet them 5 years later. You don't say, well, Well, you insulted that person 5 years ago. He said, you insulted me 5 years ago. Or you helped me 5 years ago. It's when you look into that continuum of who you are, and whether that really exists, is a self, as a person, the object in which you identify yourself with is really the mind. It's not the body. So the most important object, therefore, to understand the emptiness of, and this is very clear within many of Buddhist teachings, the most important, not the only object, but the most important object to understand the emptiness of is the mind. Not the body, not external phenomena. Those things are all empty. In fact, the nature of a table, the emptiness of a table and the emptiness of a phone and the emptiness of your body and the emptiness of your mind is all the same emptiness. It's all the same basic emptiness. But the most important thing to understand emptiness on is your mind. So in this quote then it says the mind, firstly, which looks at the mind, the basis of what the mind is devoid of mind. It's empty of mind. Now if you relate this to the teachings of the Buddha, you have what we call the three turnings of the wheel of the Buddhist teachings. How many of you, I'm sure Tim you know, but how many are familiar with the three turnings of the wheel? You heard of three turnings of the wheel? Yeah. What's the first turning of the wheel?
Four Noble Truths.
At Varanasi, right? The first turning of the wheel is related in this quote to the first bit, the mind. Why is it related to that? Because what happens in the first turning of the wheel? And basically in the first turning of the wheel, the Buddha taught things as they are. This is suffering. First noble truth. This is suffering. This is how we suffer. This is where suffering comes from. This is the cause of suffering. This is how we stop suffering. The Four Noble Truths. This is how we stop suffering. This is the ending of suffering. And this is the path which leads to it. He taught things on a normal, conventional level of what's wrong and what we need to do about it. It wasn't specifically, although it was mentioned in the first turning of the wheel, he wasn't emphasising the fact that the suffering is empty. Although there is suffering, that it's not really existent. He wasn't emphasising that the cause of suffering doesn't really exist. He wasn't talking about that. His main thing he was talking about is this is suffering. This is suffering. This is where it comes from. This is how you deal with it. And this is how it ends. Those four truths. So the first teaching of the wheel is known within Buddhist teachings as being the wheel which was for everybody. So if you look at the different Buddhist traditions, if you look at the Mahayana tradition and the Hinayana tradition, the Four Noble Truths is the basis for everybody. Everybody works from that. It's not specifically going into the details of how things exist. What's the nature of things exist? What's the nature of suffering? What's the nature of the cause of suffering? Does suffering really exist or not? It doesn't talk about that, although it's mentioned. Not that it exclusively doesn't talk about it, but it's not the main thrust of the first turning of the wheel. The main thrust of the first turning of the wheel is to show things how they are. What is suffering? Where does suffering come from? Etc., etc. So the first turning of the wheel relates, therefore, to this first part of the quote, the mind. Because from that level, what we're doing is we're looking at how phenomena exist. How phenomena exist on an everyday, normal, conventional level. And the first turning of the wheel is all about that. Then, in the second turning of the wheel, then the Buddha said, what did the Buddha say? What is the second turning of the wheel, mainly? Mainly Paramita Sutras. And what did the Buddha say in those? Everything is empty. So, although there is suffering, and although there is, well, we just read in the sutra we did when we started, there's no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue. There's no nothing. There is suffering, but actually there's no suffering. There is a cause of suffering, but in fact there's no cause of suffering. In the second turn of the world, the Buddha is focusing on the fact that things are not truly existent. They don't exist as they appear. That there is a contradiction between him, and I love this way of looking at it, is that there's a contradiction between appearance and reality. What appears to you, and the way it appears to you, and the way it exists are in contradiction. They don't fit. Things appear to you one way, but they exist another way. And we'll look into when we get to that about why that is and how the mind is related to that. But very simply speaking, why do things appear one way and exist another way? Because our mind labels them one way, and our mind screws up, basically. it gets it wrong. It labels things to be things which they're not. Why does a phone appear to be a phone? Because our minds label it as a phone. And the problem is that we label a phone on something which is not a phone. And we label everything, the thing which we label as things is not the label. So we label ourself on our mind and body, but there's nothing within our mind and body actually which is ourself. We label self onto, well, this is me, here I am, I'm male, I'm English, I'm this, I'm that. All the things we label me onto, my body, your body's not you, but we label you on the body. Your mind is not you, your thoughts, all the thoughts that we have, none of those things are you, but we label you onto them. The basis of of imputation, if you like, the basis of what we label things onto as something is never the thing. So the appearance and reality are totally different. We think that this table, the table is a table from its own side, we label it as a table, but nothing that which we label as being a table here is actually a table. That's the top of the table, it's not a table. That's the underneath of the table, that's not a table. That's the legs of the table, that's not a table. None of the things which we put the word table onto are table. So there's an immediate problem there, or contradiction between the way things appear, this appears to be a table to us, and the way they actually exist. If they existed as they appeared, then the thing you're labelling table should be a table. You should be able to find table here. Take this apart, or whatever you need to do. Take all the things from this are the legs of the table, so that's obviously not the table because that's a part of the table. That's the legs of the table, that's the top of the table, that's the side of the table. Those are all parts of the table, they're not table. But if it existed the way it appears, you should be able to find table amongst the things you're looking for. So there is a contradiction between the way things appear and the way they actually exist. And the same is true with the mind. The mind appears to be my mind. Something which exists as your mind, as something which we label as this is my mind, this is me, this is my mind. But none of the things which you label as your mind are your mind, are they? You label, get up in the morning and you feel rubbish, so you label your mind as being in a bad mood. But that's a feeling you have in your mind. It's not your mind, is it? You're in a good mood, and you label, oh, my mind's feeling happy today. My mind's happy today. You label your mind as being happy. But your mind is not a happy feeling, is it? There's a happy feeling in your mind, but your mind is not a happy feeling. The mind is not the emotional feeling. The mind is not the anxious feeling. The mind is not the depressed feeling. These are all feelings within the mind, emotions or thoughts or things you have within. They're not the mind itself, are they? So anything you label as being your mind, so you say right now, identify your mind. What's your mind thinking right now? So it might be happy, unhappy, bored, fed up, might be looking forward to lunchtime, whatever it is in your mind. Is that your mind? Is that your mind, or is that a thought in your mind? Is that your mind, or is that your mind how it feels right now? Which one is it? It's not your mind, is it? It's a thought in your mind. The thought of lunch, or the thought of break, or the thought of what are we talking about? Whatever it is that's in your mind is a thought in your mind. It's not your mind, is it? But if I said to you, well, where is your mind? Identify your mind. Can you identify it in any other way other than the thoughts that are going on in your mind? Can you?
The blade cutting itself, isn't it?
What?
When you're saying you look at,
Yes.
well, it's the you that's looking at, isn't it? That you can't look at because it's looking.
So the you that's looking, is that a thought in your mind, or is that your mind?
Well, as soon as you make it a thought, it's a thought.
So
But how do you look at what's looking? Like I say, it's that.
the thing that's doing the looking, so you take the you that's doing the looking. I'm looking at my mind now.
You instruct it, it's a thought. It's not
That's a
mind
thought, isn't
anymore,
it?
is it?
It's not the mind. It's a thought looking at
Yeah.
the mind, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the mind that you're looking at with that thought is that another thought or is that your
Another
mind?
concept.
Another
Thought.
concept, isn't it?
Concept, yeah.
If you say, well, I'm looking at the mind, the I which is looking is a thought, isn't it? And the mind you're looking at with that is also a thought. Because you can't say I'm looking at the mind in general. I just know this generality of thing which is mind, which encompasses all the instances of mind, and is always there and is my mind. You can't do that, can you?
So mind is the outside of the concept, isn't it? That you can't ever conceive, because as soon as you start to try, you're thinking a thought.
You think of a thought,
Kind of
exactly.
Yeah. It's Rangrig, isn't it?
So I say,
It's Rangrig is at the looking at
the
trying to figure
self-knower.
out-
Well,
yeah.
that's in principally in Prasanka we say that we don't talk about self-knowers.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you're talking about self-knower, what is a self-knower? And this is a good way of showing the mind and the way it's. We will have a. When you see something or when you experience something, you look at the phone. Look at this phone now. In 2 minutes' time, you can remember looking at the phone. You can remember the phone you were looking at, yes? But you can also remember looking at the phone. You remember the two things, yes? You remember the phone and looking at the phone. So people who say there's a self-knower are saying not only are you looking, is there a consciousness looking at the phone, but there must be a consciousness looking at the mind looking at the phone. Otherwise, how could you remember looking at
And
the
now
phone?
there's a consciousness looking
Looking
at
at-
consciousness.
yeah,
is
another
looking
one.
at mind.
Infinite regress. Yeah.
So, but however far back you go, or whether you stop there, whether you go on forever, it's always a thought looking at a thought.
Yeah, yeah,
There's a thought looking at the phone, and there's a thought looking at the mind looking at the phone.
yeah.
So, however far back you go, whichever stage you go along that process, none of them are the mind. None of those things are the mind. They're just thoughts in the mind, aren't they? So, again, the point is here, the thing you're labelling, which we label, all of us would say we have a mind, wouldn't we? We wouldn't say we're totally mindless. Maybe sometimes we are, but in general, we have a mind. So, if I said to you, well, tell me what that mind is, point it out to me, show it to me, all you can ever do is show me thoughts within that mind. You can't show me the mind itself, can you? And none of those thoughts are the mind, are they? None of those thoughts alone are your mind. So, again, as with the phone or the table or anything else, you're giving the name mind to something which is not mind. But, aren't you? None of those things are the mind. But if I said to you, show me your mind, tell me what your mind is, all you can do is give me thoughts. And they're not your mind. They're just thoughts within your mind. So again, you're giving the name or the imputation or the label mind onto something which is not a mind. So that's the principal reasoning why the appearance and the reality don't conform. They're different. Appearance and the way things appear and the way things actually are not the same. Because when we have the mind appearing, we think we have a mind. Or when the phone appears to us, we think this is a phone. And we consent to that appearance. But if you push it and say, well, where is the phone, which is appearing to you, the reality is you can't find anything here which is the phone. All you can find is parts, which are not the phone. Same thing as thoughts in the mind. You can find the thoughts in the mind, but you can't find the mind. You can find the parts of the phone, but you can't find the phone. So the phone appearing to you as if it was a phone is wrong. Isn't it? The appearance is wrong. There is an appearance, and we assent to the appearance, but it's wrong. We're giving the label phone. Everything we give the label phone to is not a phone. Just as everything we give the label mind to is not a mind. Everything, and it's the same with everything. So the mind, the basic thing which we call the mind, which we'll examine into, which we'll look into and see what we mean by mind as we go on to this first part of the quote, is devoid of mind. the thing which we call mind is not mind. It's empty of mind. It doesn't exist. Now that level, as Tim said there, that level of teachings within the Buddhist teaching comes into what we call the second turning of the wheel. The wisdom, the wisdom sutras which arise in the second turn, which were taught at Rajagriha. The first turning of the wheel was taught where? Varanasi. Second turning of the wheel was taught at Rajagriha, and that was the wisdom sutras. The sutras, the Prajnaparamita, the wisdom sutras, which looked into, yes, there is suffering, yes, there are causes of suffering, yes, there's cessation of suffering, and yes, there's a path which leads to the cessation of suffering, but try and find those things and you never find them. Try and find suffering, you label it on something, but it doesn't exist. It doesn't truly exist. Try and find the cause of suffering, you can't find it. It doesn't truly exist. So all those things, they appear, but they don't exist the way they appear. So the second turning of the wheel was about that. Now, the second turning of the wheel corresponds therefore to the teachings on emptiness. Now the teachings on emptiness are, again, for all vehicles, all Buddhists need to understand the teachings on emptiness, but principally the Mahayana sutras were taught from the Prajnaparamita sutras were taught from the Mahayana point of view, from the point of view of beings who wanted to be a bodhisattva, wanted to practice the Mahayana path. So the mind, the basis which is the mind, first turning of the wheel, Four Noble Truths. The mind is devoid of mind, the mind is empty of mind, second turning of the wheel, the Prajnaparamita Sutra. And the last part of the quote there says, the nature of the mind is clear light. Now this can be translated in two different ways, and I've translated it this way, but it's often translated as, the mind is devoid of mind because the nature of the mind is clear light. And that third part of the quote, for there, I've just done it as the mind is devoid of mind, for the nature of mind is clear light, in the purpose being to divide those three parts of the quote. But in fact, they're very much interrelated, of course. They're interrelated for a number of different reasons. But first, what does that third bit mean? The third bit of the quote relates to the third turning of the wheel. The third turning of the wheel is talking, the principal subject within the third turning of the wheel is Buddha nature. Is the fact that the nature of our minds is already Buddha. That the basic fundamental level of our minds is already Buddha. And the third turning of the wheel is saying, well, yes, there's a mind. Okay, there's a mind. It suffers. There are reasons why it suffers. There's a way of stopping the suffering, the Four Noble Truths. There is a mind. That's the basic. But, as the second wheel second turning of the wheel says, the mind is empty. There is no mind, although we say there's a mind, and all we talk about the mind, we talk about all the functions and all the parts of the mind, there actually is no mind. The third turning of the wheel says that you already knew that always. You already knew that there was no mind. You just didn't realise it. You already knew that your mind was empty. You are already aware that you're already a Buddha. In other words, you just don't know it. And that's the third turning of the wheel is that. Third turning of the wheel is saying that there is a level of our minds. There's the conventional level, which we're going to look at in the first part of the quote. There's the fact that the mind is empty. It doesn't truly exist. There's a deeper level of the mind, on which, at the level of that level of mind, you're already a Buddha. You're already enlightened. Because there is a level of our minds which we call the clear light, the fundamental nature of our minds. It's called different things in different traditions. In our tradition we call the fundamental mind of clear light, or the primordial mind, but it's also called Rigpa in other traditions. It's called the foundation of the basis of samsara, the basis of nirvana. It's the basis of everything. what it's talking about is saying that our mind has levels. We don't talk about conscious and subconscious in Buddhist presentation of the mind. In fact, the Western psychological presentation of conscious and subconscious would all come into what we consider from a Buddhist point of view the gross level of mind. We divide mind into gross, subtle and very subtle. Those three levels. The grossest level of mind is our senses. What we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we touch, that's all the grossest level of mind. A more subtle level of mind is the mental consciousness. And within that you have a sort of gross mental consciousness, or a feeling of you, me, I'm this person who I am now. That's only going to be with you this life. When you die at the end of this life, nothing which you think of as being you will go with you. You're gone. You're being you now is a one-off thing, and it's going to be very quick, and it's going to finish very quickly. When you die at the end of this life, that's all gone. Me being Josh or Tim or Fiona or whoever it is, that's a very temporary state. You being a human being, a human mind. Hopefully, if we do the right things, we might be human next time. But if we're not, this is our very brief opportunity of having a human mind. Because when you die at the end of this life, your human mind's gone. You don't have a human mind anymore. Initially, you will have an in-between life or a bardo mind. And if you're lucky, you might get another human mind next time. If you're very lucky. But this human mind is going to finish. When you die, the human mind finishes. That's a gross level of mind. It's not subtle. It's a very gross sort of basic level of mind, which is what we identify really as being ourselves now. It's ridiculous, actually, when you really think about it. What we identify as being me, I, is a very temporary, gross level of consciousness, which is really quite meaningless. But we hold on to that as being myself. You know, I'm male, I'm English, I come from here, I come from there, whatever. All that we identify as being me is on a very gross level, actually. Very, very unsophisticated level, actually, of what we believe to be ourselves. So that's what we call a gross level of mind. Our subtle level of mind, really, the mental consciousness that we have, really the majority of our mental consciousness that we think of and relate to on a day-to-day basis is also gross. It's not a very subtle level of mind either. It's a little bit more subtle than the senses, but it's not a subtle level of mind. It's also a very gross level of mind. So all that process of thinking and identifying emotions and so forth, they're all fairly gross as well. Underneath that is a subtle level of awareness. Now that subtle level of awareness is below our senses. Now, it's below our senses, and it's also below our thoughts. How do we know it's there? Because not only do you hear something, but you're aware that you're hearing something. Not only do you feel something in your body, but you're aware that you're feeling something. Not only do you think things, but you can know you're thinking things. I can think, I'm thinking about that now. Or I was thinking about that. Usually because our awareness or our mindfulness is not very strong, we tend to only retrospectively think, I was thinking about that a few minutes ago. 5 minutes ago I was thinking about what I'm having for my lunch, or something like that. You can retrospectively look back at everything, but if you're sharp and if you're meditating and if your awareness is good, you can be aware of what you're thinking now, can't you? I'm sure you've all had that experience to some degree, that when you're meditating you can think, I'm thinking. You can see yourself thinking. You can see your thoughts. You can be aware of your thoughts. The fact that you can be aware of your thoughts means there's a level of mind which is not your thoughts, doesn't it? If there wasn't, you wouldn't be able to be aware of your thoughts. In the same way that I know I've got a hand, if I was my hand, I couldn't know I've got a hand, could I? Because there'll be no separation between me and the hand. I know I've got a hand because I'm not my hand. Same thing with the thoughts. You know you have thoughts, you know things are going around in your mind because there's a level of mind which is not your thoughts. That's what we call the subtle mind. And when we do our next meditation, our aim is to, or one of the meditations we'll try and identify and come in contact with that. That's the subtle mind. But there is another level of mind below that, which is called the very subtle mind, or the primordial mind, or the mind of the clear light nature of mind, or Rigpa, all these other words that are used for it. That level of mind is called the very subtle consciousness. That's the one that goes from life to life. None of the others will. Nothing else will go to life. The only thing they say within the text that level of mind is permanent, and permanent from the point of view that it's always there. Not from the point of view that it doesn't change, because it's always changing moment to moment like any impermanent thing is. It's always changing moment, but it's always there. It's been there since the beginning of this time, it will be always there. That fundamental level of mind. Now on that level of mind, there are no delusions. There are no delusions. Now why there are no delusions, let me take a break in a minute. We'll come to after the break. But that's the last part of the quote. The nature of the mind is clear, is referring to that level of mind, the very subtle consciousness. Okay, so we'll come back in what? Half an hour, is it? Yeah?